Welcome, friends. Welcome, everybody. My name is David Griscom, and you are watching Left Reckoning, this week's Griscom stream, the only pro-worker podcast, broadcasting to you live from the great state of Texas. Hope you are doing good wherever you are at, and looking forward to being back. I've been on vacation for the past week or so, so ready to get back in the saddle. We got some stories to talk about today. Looking forward to hearing from y'all in the chat. Just a kind of up top note, I'm going to have to cut this one a little short because I have a job to do in about half an hour. So we got 3 stories we're going to get to, so try to keep it on topic. But we're going to be talking UAW, UPS in just a second. We're also going to be talking about Leo Panich and some lessons for the left. But before we get to all of that, there's something that we have to start with because it's a bit of a Left Reckoning special here. A little visit from friend of the pod, Jordan Peterson, and his recent conversation with R.F. Kennedy, talking about climate change. And I mean, look, at this point, I think everybody knows who RFK is. I think some of the people who are still holding out on this maybe being some kind of progressive or left-wing challenge, Lord help us, have been proven wrong. Probably going to hold on to it for a while because they don't want to lose face, whatever. Be gracious, be patient. But let's watch this for a second because it really does highlight a lot of not just like this is even less about RFK and Jordan Peterson. It's just a way that some people talk about climate change that is exceptionally dangerous, given the fact that not only is there not really a radical critique in here, in fact, in this seemingly maybe radical or different way of looking at the problem, it is just bad conventional wisdom on how to deal with this problem. But let's just play this for a second. We can hear it, and we'll get to some of the other stories in a second.
I've seen the climate apocalypse use fear to induce something approximating the same kind of level of tyranny, as far as I'm concerned, that characterized the vaccine lockdown. So help me sort that out.
First of all, let me just say this about climate. I believe that carbon in the atmosphere and methane does increase warming. Look around, you can see it everywhere. Ice caps are melting, etc. The Greenland ice sheet. I spent a lot of time outdoors, and I see over 69 years, I've seen the changes, and I've seen the mass migration of animals, of southern animals like black vultures, the northern increase in their ranges. I've kept track since I was a kid about when the leaves turns, and it's steadily moved up each year. And so I see that all of my senses are telling me that the warming is occurring. My opinion is basically, as I said, it's based on common sense. I agree 100% with you that this crisis is being used as a pretext for clamping down totalitarian controls the same way that the COVID crisis was. And it's the same people, it's intelligence agencies, it's the World Economic Forum, it's the Billionaires Voice Club at Davos, and it's the same kind of cabal of people who will use every crisis to stratify society toward, greater power for the super rich and greater power for the military, greater power for the intelligence apparatus, and less power for everybody else. A war on carbon is not going to solve the problem. If we don't have a habitat left at the end, my approach to energy is using free markets and not top-down control. We can recover what we had, but we just have to stay out of fear because that is the weapon of tyrants. If you like.
All right. So let's get into this a little bit because look, one thing that we do talk about on this program a lot is some of the dangers of what might be coming if we don't have a worker and working class focused climate policy, right? You're seeing examples of that in France and in other places where the costs, both social and most importantly, economic, are put on the shoulders of working people, right? So it's not a reformation of the system. It's not a radical democratizing moment where we have more power over our energy sources. It's higher energy prices for working people. Very dangerous, extremely dangerous. And there's absolutely a new round of green austerity that's being cooked up by people. But this is why, RFK, I think, is somebody to really look at as a kind of warning tale, because what he's doing here is he's talking about, very real feelings that people have that, the system's rigged, that the people in charge of our economic system, from the folks at Davos to the IMF, etc., don't have the interests of everyday people at heart. That's 100% fair. But what is the solution here? What is he talking about? He's not talking about doing anything radical. He's saying we're going to make the free market work. And there's two things here that I think are really ridiculous and worth pointing out. One, when you're talking about the free market, what does that mean? Who has the most power in the market? Well, those same super rich people he was just demonizing a second ago. And then what is the free market solution to climate change, right? What he's talking about here. This is the guiding principle of climate change policy the world over, from before the IRA here in the United States, right? When it's if we just get the right price of carbon, the system will work. Oh, if we just deregulate the energy system, this system will work, right? Those prices will become realized. Yeah, maybe the government will have to basically create those prices by putting carbon taxes or things like that. But basically, if we can find this perfect number, this correct this correct economic understanding of what climate change will do to the environment, will do to society, then the market will work. Well, we've seen time and time again that has not led to the results that we need, because the fundamental reality is that climate change is a technology problem. The technology that we have is producing too much carbon. Why does it produce that? Well, it produces that because it's under a system of capitalism that uses RFK's favorite thing, free markets. And what do they want to do more than anything? Not just cheap, but the most profitable ways of producing energy that are possible. And the problem for wind, solar, and nuclear power, all technologies that will be necessary to transform our economy, to transform our energy system, a lot of those systems don't work as well for people who just want to make profit. Because when you look at the reality of climate change, particularly when it comes to energy production, the biggest hurdle that we have right now is we have a system in this country and in a lot of places all around the world that is privatized. And it's the fact that it produces electricity, the fact that it cools your home in the summer or warms your home in the winter. That's a secondary effect of numbers on a sheet going to somebody's bank account who controls that system. What we have to be doing in response to climate change is saying these are social costs, these are social necessities. These things should be run democratically, be run affordably for working class people. And the way that you do that is by taking democratic control over our energy systems. So no, we're not going to use coal anymore, right? But we're going to make sure that the people who work in those industries are taken care of. Yes, we're going to build out more solar and wind, but we're going to do it in a reasonable and logical way, not a kind of haphazard way as we're seeing right now. And yes, we're going to build more nuclear power plants because that is a very important base load of constantly produced, cheap, affordable power that produces a lot of great jobs and a lot of important benefits for the community. The IRA, right, which, this is the big climate legislation of our life, completely embraces the market, right? Is the state the one that's out there building these kind of systems? No. They're trying to induce the free market, the people who have capital, the people who have money, the people who have power in our society, to do the thing that most people want, right? Which is direct action on climate change. If we get the numbers right by giving them subsidies, by giving them tax benefits, then maybe they will build out the systems that we need. You look at the way that a lot of these green tax credits, not just from the IRA, but before, have been used to sort of proliferate wind and solar and clean energy. It's offset stuff. It's something so that a company like Walmart or Amazon, which emit tremendous amounts of carbon into the atmosphere to pursue profit for themselves, they can, pay money to people who are either not using as much electricity or using green electricity to offset what they're doing. It's not something that is actually necessarily always taking carbon out of the atmosphere, producing less carbon. It's just a way for companies to say, oh, actually, well, we've invested this much money. We've paid we've paid for tax credits from these other systems, these other producers. So yeah, that's going to offset the incredibly wasteful and dangerous activities that we're already engaged in, right? The free market system has been a complete failure at being able to deal with climate change. And it's not solely just because of the cost of green and renewable energy. It's because the profit margin in natural gas and coal and oil is so much higher than what you're going to get from renewable energies, and in particular nuclear. Because once nuclear is expensive upfront, but once you get a system like that running, it runs very affordably and doesn't create the margins that are necessary. It produces too much power, right? So it doesn't create the scarcity that is necessary for for a capitalist who owns these kind of electric systems to be able to take as much profit as possible. So this is RFK, I think, doing something that he's making a career of now in his political run of, talking, in very scary language. I mean, that clip, right? The music, everything about it, like talking to people's real anxieties about systems that feel far from us, right? Because you don't have a lot of input right now into the way that energy is produced, into the damage that it's doing to the environment, speaking truly to the anxieties that people have, but doing it in a way that doesn't produce any solutions, and in fact only continues this kind of confusion about what should actually be done, because he's not actually offering anything radical, any kind of real break with the policy of Macron, with the policy of Biden. He's offering the same exact thing, but he's playing it up in a way to make it feel like, oh, he's speaking to our fears and our anxieties. Now, the RFK campaign, I don't think, is going anywhere. But this is something that we're seeing time and time again, not just in the United States, but all across the world, of people being able to tap into real anxiety that people are feeling, and then trying to deliver that anxiety, not to solutions, not to solidarity, not to movements of working people, but rather to a reshuffling. Because it's absurd to sit here and say, oh, the climate change policy is just trying to deliver more power to the rich. What we need to do is deliver more power to the rich by relying on the free market system. It's absurd on its face. And the fact that, somebody like Peterson is so comfortable and happy to talk to him, I think tells you enough. But folks, let's talk a little bit. Again, this is gonna be a shorter one than I'd like, but I have to go to another job in just a little bit. There's 2 or 3 more things I wanted to stories I want to jump to, but want to get here. Secret Agent Dan says, ask Texas energy consumers about the utility of deregulation. Yeah, totally. I mean, Texas, the places that are more deregulated than others actually pay significantly more than the ones that still have public power. And like the government, the thing that's so frustrating about climate change is that it's a very serious problem. It's going to take tremendous amounts of mobilization, but what you really need, we have models for how to do this. If we just built out more systems like the Tennessee Valley Authority that not only produce cheap and affordable electricity for Southerners when the market was not interested in doing that, right? It also took a very broad view of its role, which was doing economic development in parts of the country that have been underfunded and undercared for in U.S. history, right? This poor working class people in the South. Build out more TVAs. It's a great system. It works very well. There can be problems, but the difference between dealing with a TVA and dealing with a private energy company is that the public actually has an ability to influence those systems versus, just being sort of stuck into market logic, right? And hoping that the capitalists and the rich do things to the benefit of the many. Daniel also asks, any advice for folks not to get black-pilled on climate stuff, Dave? I'll just say this. It's like you don't really have a choice to get black-pilled. It is a daunting challenge. It is frightening. And I know a lot of people are feeling it right now. Is like here, we've been in this heat dome. I don't know how much longer it's going to last. It's been over 100 degrees here for weeks now, right? Just extremely devastating. People are literally losing their lives at work right now. It is a very real problem. You should take it seriously. But becoming a nihilist, becoming defeated by these systems is exactly what those at the top want. And we just don't really have the choice, in my opinion, to become black-pilled or to become cynical about this, because there is going to be action on this. It probably won't be enough, right? But yeah, there is a very real threat that basically what this, that the response to climate change will be draconian measures against poor and working class people. And if you sort of blackpill yourself or become nihilistic about this kind of thing, you won't be able to participate in sort of fighting back and building something different. There's been tremendous advocacy. The green movement in this country, I think, isn't as far along as we need it to be, but it's been waking up at least sections of it, to the reality that, yeah, we do need to have labor support. We do need to have people who already work in extractive industries, who already work in energy production, playing a leading role in this. And we're going to listen to them, participate with them, and build a movement with them. That movement, I think, is one of the most optimistic things in U.S. politics right now, along with some of the other labor and more labor militancy stuff that we'll get to in just a second. We just don't have a choice about this kind of thing. Also, I know some people. So again, I've been away for a bit. My inbox is full. We have a lot of messages and things like that. So if I haven't got to any of your stuff, I would like to. Lerda was asking me about a historian. I saw your email. I haven't had a chance to respond yet. I'll check them out. I think we'd be very happy to talk with them in the near future. But for anyone who's sort of waiting for a response from me, feel free to ping me again. I've been away, and I was at my friend's wedding, so I sort of unplugged for a little bit, which was very nice. All right, folks, I want to get to all these stories, so let's keep jumping, because this is something we should all be extremely excited about, and I think is one of the most important things that's happening in this country right now, which is this potential UPS strike. First of all, incredible movements outside of this. Let's also, show solidarity with our friends who produce media. The writers look like they are going to be joined by actors in their strike. Definitely support that, particularly if you're in areas or regions where they produce a lot of television and movies. Also, here we have our nurses strike, I believe also in Kansas as well. Continue showing solidarity with them. I don't have time to get into some of the goofy stuff, but people might have seen there's this video of this, I don't know, scab influencer out there, sort of celebrating a day in the life of trying to break a strike. Solidarity with the striking nurses and nothing but contempt for scabs. But I want to talk about UPS for a second, because that's a story that I think is one of the most important ones. Remember, this contract is likely to go up at the end of the month. While I was away last week, UPS union Teamster members walked out of negotiations after they had already won some important things. Like, they have been fighting very hard for air conditioning in trucks. They got air conditioning in new trucks and some more fans and vents for the older fleet. They have been able to make, significant gains, but they're not going to back down, because remember, UPS has made tremendous amounts of money over the past couple of years, particularly during COVID and with the rise of e-commerce, and they are not willing to share those profits with the people who produce them, those people being the workers. It's incredibly inspiring to see this continued mobilization and militancy and not backing down from the UPS workers, the Teamsters. All across the country today and this week, there have been what they're calling practice picket lines. They are mobilizing right now. It is serious. This is a time, if you're watching this program, if you care about labor, if you care about workers, it's time for you to tune into your local networks, find out ways to support the workers in the short term. And then next month, if they do go on strike, find out ways to fight with them, show up at a picket line, continue to talk about them, because there's already a media blitz out there. Business Insider wrote this ridiculous piece interviewing a Teamster member who was saying, oh, they're just so tired of the drama. They have a great job, right? There's already going to be all this kind of stuff to undermine this strike. There's going to be fights within the union about how best to mobilize people. This is a time where the left, particularly right now, in the decline, when we don't have, for example, presidential options, when we don't have a lot of political campaigns to get around, this is the time to be mobilized. If you're really serious about building a more working class centered movement, this is the time. The fight has been incredibly inspiring to see how quickly it's been able to mobilize, and also how united the Teamsters have been, not accepting, for example, these two-tiered contracts, concessions against the people on the lower rung of the UPS system. I'm going to play for a second a little bit of Sean O'Brien. We're big fans of him on the show. Talking, and this is just a great masterclass on how to respond to many of the attacks that the Teamsters are going to face as they push forward potentially with this strike.
Sounds like a signing bonus is something that might be in the works in terms of what you want for your workers.
No, I think it's more than signing bonus. I mean, we have part-timers working at poverty wages. We've got, and they're the unsung heroes. Everybody loves a UPS driver in their neighborhood, but those packages don't get on those trucks without the hard work of the part-timers, who some are living poverty wages. Some are living in subsidized housing, working 2 and 3 jobs. It's a tough job, and we need to be rewarded for it. And our members are standing up, and they're ready to fight. 100,000 part-timers at UPS make less than $20 per hour. UPS is on this propaganda campaign where they're saying they're making over $20 per hour. That's not true.
Yeah, I mean, UPS would say and has said that part-time workers are averaging $20 an hour after 30 days, that they get health care coverage that they don't have to pay premiums for. They get access to a pension. You're saying that's not the case?
No, they do. They do get health insurance, but they have to wait 9 months. The turnover ratio, because the work is so demanding, is astronomical. So a lot of those part-timers that go to work at UPS, they don't last. They don't trigger benefits for sometimes 9 months. It is true they do have great health care because we negotiate it. UPS doesn't give that out of the kindness of their heart. We've fought decades upon decades to make sure that our members have the best benefits in the industry. So UPS is not giving that out of the kindness of their heart.
And that is exactly it right there, right? Because what we're going to get, you're seeing it in almost all of the kind of hostile media reporting on this. It's like, well, why are these UPS workers so upset? They get paid decently compared to other folks. They get health care, right? That's a big bargaining chip, right? And this has always been the way that the media tries to break solidarity amongst working people, saying, hey, you know, these guys are greedy. They're asking, look, they get more than you do. And what he's saying right there, I think, is so great because it's important, one, for continuing to build up morale within the Teamsters, but it's also important for the entire working classes. The UPS is not giving this stuff to us out of the kindness of their heart. They're giving it to us because we've been fighting for this for years. They've been trying to threaten it. They're trying to take away things. And we're not only not going to let them take away more from us, we're going to demand more than what we get. Because remember, UPS is a company that has been profiting immensely. They gave out $8.6 billion to shareholders in dividends and buybacks in 2022 alone. They're making record profits, continue to make record profits from these very people who they are now trying to demonize and attack. UPS is very mealy-mouthed about this. You're going to hear a lot of crying from Fox News, from Fox Business, from CNBC, etc., about all these greedy Teamsters. They're asking for too much. And they're going to shut down the economy because, you know, they want basically to live in splendor. Well, you know what? Newsflash, all working people deserve that. And you know why they get that? Is because they're in a union and they're willing to withhold their labor when push comes to shove. What has happened in the Teamsters is something that can happen in any union in this country, which is electing more militant and radical leadership, promoting them, fighting for them, and not backing down just because you got 1 or 2 things that you asked for. Say, we demand the earth. It has an incredible knockdown effect for all workers. Because I want to play this right here. Because remember, this is about the Teamsters, but this is about the working class movement as a whole and the labor movement across this country. Because the Teamsters taking this brave stance right now inspires people all across the spectrum. We have this right here from the UAW, the United Auto Workers, who are also facing contract negotiations against some of the most wicked corporations in this country. Remember, the UAW also has refused to endorse Biden because he has been has had a weak spine when it comes to dealing with the big automakers in this country who are trying to use the climate transition, right, the transition to electric vehicles, to undermine union contracts. I just want to play this right now because I think this is an incredible piece of media. It's incredibly exciting and inspiring to see that it's not just the Teamsters, it's not just the writers, it's not just the nurses. There is a militancy that is brewing in the American labor movement and the American working class that we have to be supporting. We should be very damn excited that it's here now.
Good to see you, brother. You ready for this?
Myself and members of the International Executive Board will be kicking off negotiations in a whole new way by shaking hands with the members.
You all right?
Stephanie Williams, just wanted to say hi.
Oh, yeah.
We want to hear from working members. We want to take your message straight to the bargaining table.
My big issue on cost of living.
You bet.
Pension for the guys on
retirement
get rid of the
security.
tiers. Get rid of the tiers.
You bet.
In a break with tradition, there won't be no public handshake ceremony with the companies. I'm not shaking hands with any CEOs until they do right by our members and we fix the broken status quo at the big three.
If you're not with us, then get out the way. Because we're marching for it, right?
Yeah, you're damn right.
The members have to come first. That's just one of the many changes we're making in order to win a historic victory at the Big Three. We're changing how we negotiate, we're changing how we organize, how we fight, and how we win.
These are the knockdown effects. This is what happened if you are in a union when you say we're going to start pushing back and demanding more representation and a better, leadership, frankly, that is willing to stand up to these people. We're not shaking hands with CEOs. We're shaking hands with the members, right? We're going to fight to end these two-tier contracts, right? That's a thing that's across the labor movement right now, these two-tier contracts. UAW is talking about it. The Teamsters are talking about it. No more of this divide and conquer strategy to labor. Labor's been on the back foot for decades. We can talk about some of the structural reasons as to why these concessions were taken in the first place. But now labor's saying, no, we're going to fight back and push back. And that's a damn exciting thing. In a second, we're going to talk a little bit. I know this has been a little wham bam episode. Very excited to be back. We'll be back on Tuesday. Also, reminder, patrons, the Sunday show is going to be coming out on Monday, just because I've got a lot of stuff coming back since I've been here. Please consider supporting the show at patreon.com/Left Reckoning. This is a really critical moment in left politics. And in the labor movement right now. All of your support means so much to us. We want to really be here covering this as much as possible, because you've seen the kind of decline and confusion on the left now that Bernie Sanders is not running for president. You've seen the kind of problems that we've had with some of our strategy, with the lack of willingness to sort of delineate, make a distinction between democratic socialist politics and what the Democratic Party stands for, right? The only way that we'll be able to break out of this morass, the only way that we're going to be able to get those kind of victories, to get those kind of movements and moments that sustain a movement that's going to have to take a long time to build power, is by showing up to these fights and getting these kind of wins for working people. Something that was not developed enough for the Warrior Met coal workers in Alabama. It was something that was lacking at the railroad strike. It's not a time that you cannot sit on your ass. Consider supporting the show so we can continue covering these things, and not a lot of the other kind of nonsense drama things that are always going on in the media, just in general. And it really helps us continue to grow the show and cover a lot of these things. Ben Burgess is in the chat, and he just wanted to let everybody know, and appreciate the live update here, that it looks like the SAG strike is now official. Seeing stuff posted from big news organizations in the last minute. SAG strike is now official. So we got Hollywood shut down. I mean, this is labor summer right now. This is the time to show up and fight and support. All right. I know this is a quick episode. I'm sorry I'm not going to be able to get to most of y'all's questions, but I have a couple things on my mind I would like to get to before we roll. We'll do more on this. We've been doing it from the get-go, but I wanted to just take a second and give folks a little bit of a strategic orientation to what the difference between, let's call them, socialist politics and populist politics. Both the socialist movement and the populist movement developed concurrently in this most recent iteration, right? I think we could very easily call the Bernie movement a kind of one foot in, one foot out between a left populism and a socialist politics. We saw how far that kind of configuration can get us. It can do a lot, but you see structurally that there are some real impediments to having that movement sustain itself. We're going to have a clip from Leo Panich to close on. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about how these things develop, both in the in the United States, in the United Kingdom, in France, in Greece, in Spain, right? A lot of really exciting movements, that really mobilized people, got people engaged in politics, versus a lot of kind of left orientation, which was more focused on maybe protest or critique, right? All protest, critique, important, right? But you need structure, you need organization. Populism comes, the most recent iteration of populism, and I'm talking about this upswell in the 2010s, right? Comes out of a decline of capitalism under neoliberalism, right? You see a lower standard of living. You see a rise of this kind of technocratic post-politics class, right? Politics history is over. We just sort of need the smart people at the top to sort of adjust the edges, the kind of weird things that pop up. But the system works. We're going to sort of stick with it. what happened with the Bernie Sanders movement, with populism in general, right? Both it may be what we would call as right iteration to maybe it's more centrist, ambiguous populism to what we would call maybe left populist, people like Bernie Sanders, the Podemos movement, Syriza. You saw this return of the political, but it was people's politics without the people, right? And what do I mean by that? One of the fundamental differences between socialism and what we would call populism theoretically is populism tries to construct the people, right? The people is, it's good rhetorical flair, right? Don't get me wrong. I talk like this too. But populism tries to construct the people. The people is a very undefined group, which means that more people can be included, right? The wealthy, the powerful, bosses even, can be included, but it also means that there's way less ideological content. And that's why you can see all of these different styles of politics developing under the populist kind of banner, but with very, very different ideas as to what we should do about society. Socialism has to construct something too, but it's something that not without its own issues of definition and conception and all that kind of stuff, but tries to construct something that I think is much more material, and that is the class. The class does have to deal with self-identification, regionalism, identity, etc. But the class dynamic is one that is very clear, and it also creates the opposition, right? So if you are a member of the working class, well, who's not in the working class? It's the ownership class, it's the bosses, it's the wealthy, right? So instead of it being a kind of vague moral politics, right, where it's like the people versus the elites, it's actually defined within an economic relationship, right? That means something for politics because it means that the problem that we're facing, we understand what that system is, what that group is that is preventing us from realizing the things that we need. And it doesn't give you all the answers, but it at least gives you a strategic orientation to what forces you need to be coming for. Going back all the way to the beginning of this clip, you can see that with RFK's language about climate change, right? He says there's this group of elites that are ruining the country and also, want to control us all. But the way we're going to deal with climate change is by relying on the free market, right? Which any socialist, you watch that as a socialist, you understand why that is so absurd to be talking about elites and then saying, oh, we want the market to decide how we deal with this problem. In the same way, though, that populism tried to do politics without the people, in the U.S., our left, our socialist movement, is a socialist movement without labor, right? And what we have to be able to do is to root ourselves and orient ourselves in the class. The thing is, the class already exists. It might not be self-actualized. It might not be self-realized, but it certainly exists. We're going to talk more about populism, and this is like one of my hobby horses because it was a very defining moment of our politics, and in our lifetime. It was something that brought us back into politics. A lot of people had sort of fallen out. It also introduced a lot of people into politics. But we sort of have to be able to do this dance right now, where one, we have to be able to construct this class, these kind of working class institutions, these working class movements, ideally working class parties, to be able to participate in politics as a mass, as a group with, shared ideas, ideals, and strategy versus what we have right now, which you're speaking to the crowd, right? You're speaking to the masses and hoping that enough people hear the message and sort of respond to that. We need something that is much more organized and rooted, and that is going to take developing the capacity of working people to be able to participate in politics themselves, to be able to govern themselves, and ideally to be able to win power so that they can implement the things that we need. And this is where populism and socialism become very, very different things, because unlike a populist, right, or maybe some other forms of socialism that try to do socialism from the top, right, we get into power and then we push our policies on the behalf of the masses, but for them, not with them, not of them. The socialists have to be able to build up not just winning hearts and minds, but also building the institutions, the organizations, the rootedness in the class, so that the class is actually acting as a mobilized force instead of something that is sort of spoken to and activated from time to time, right? Activated in the sense of winning an election by getting people to show up at the polls, right? That is the more top-down political approach that, like, populism tried to reintroduce to politics and society. A socialist model certainly wants to do all these rhetorical things. We're talking big, we're getting people involved in politics, but also building at the local community workshop level, places where people are engaged with one another, we're talking with one another, we're organizing together, we're strategizing together. In this moment right now, though, where we don't have that party, that movement, we have this kind of dilemma in front of us, because the only way to get people on your side is to start winning things for them, to make it clear to them that participating in politics, particularly participating in politics with socialists, is something that not only is correct on the level of argument, but also something that can benefit their lives. I'm going to play this clip of Leo Panitch to close this out. I'll come on for a couple minutes to break it down, where he lays out this challenge. This is from this is from a YouTube video titled "Challenge of Building Socialism in the 21st Century," where he talks about something I've talked about on the show before, which is called the Iron Law of Oligarchy. And what the Iron Law of Oligarchy is, just a very fast version of it, is what happened to all of these workers' movements, these workers' parties that came into power in the 20th century that ended up becoming ossified, disunited from the class, and not delivering the kind of transformational changes that were needed. Right? These parties were very popular. They got massive reforms, massive victories for the working class, but none of these people who were living in those nations now live under anything we would remotely call socialism or workers' government. That happens because you sort of catapult people into the state. They have a perspective which is of sympathy for working people, but also of personal self-preservation, because their career now, they're a politician, right? Or they're a media figure. And there's this kind of lack of connect between the base and its representatives. And this Iron Law of Oligarchy is this kind of argument that this is just something that is sort of baked in to parliamentary politics. And, Panitch, the reason he's such an inspiration to me, the reason I think people should be reading his work, if you're not familiar with Leo Panitch, is because he takes this as a very real threat of politics, but he doesn't take it as something that has foreclosed the potential of building up real working class politics. He understands it as something that we sort of have to develop our capacities to be able to defeat. And how do you do that? By literally not doing these kind of top-down movements where you sort of evaporate the activist base into the state, and then you leave the working class disconnected from its so-called representatives. But let's play this clip, and I'll talk for a couple minutes before we roll. But people should definitely watch this entire lecture if they haven't seen it before.
So I think you have a tremendous opportunity, because you're able to speak to people through the media, and because once you're in Parliament, you're necessarily obliged to be addressing immediate reforms, immediate policies. That's what parliaments do. The danger would be that you do that without taking advantage of the situation you're in. That is, substituting yourself for ordinary people. We will do it for you by raising these questions. In fact, you won't do it as well. You won't know what to do as well. You won't be able to see what compromises you should make, what reforms you should push for, if you aren't putting even more energy, more of your time, more of your abilities into organizing those people into your extra-parliamentary organizations, whether those are aligned union branches or, better, any party mass branches you have. And that doesn't have to involve masses of people. It can involve 2-3 people who are leaders in their school. I mean, leaders in the sense the people in the school that people naturally look up to amongst the teachers. And every workplace has, and they don't even have to be leftist, has Those types of people, the people who seem to be able to gain the trust of their fellow workers. And to be able to get those people on side, to learn from them, to help them build local bases for your parliamentary organization is the most important thing you can do, I think. Now, the trouble is that I know that your parliamentarians and their staff are...
So, I just want to add to this because this is in the context of like a longer conversation. What he's getting at here is that it's not just like a moral question, right? There's morality here too, don't get me wrong. But it's not just this idea. It's like, oh, we should all be participating. It makes things better. It feels better. No one's above anyone else, right? There's aspect to that there, fine. Not denying that. But what he's making here is a very important strategic argument, is that to do the kind of things that we want to do, right? For example, like democratizing finance, right? If we want to deal with, for example, the climate crisis or poverty in this country, we're going to have to be able to take control of these institutions that control vast amounts of capital. Well, doing that is something that is really damn hard. And to be able to do that, you have to be able to build up the capacity of working class people to, one, both understand what's going on around them, but also to be able to act on these kind of things. And if you just sort of evacuate the left, right, the socialist movement into the state because, you win some elections and you have some elected officials and you sort of leave the base, the working class, right? Not, as he was saying, doesn't even necessarily have to be everybody. But you're basically leaving those local leaders, those community members, like behind, out of contact with the parties that are, supposed to be representing them. Then one, you're going to sort of lose sight, not just in the moral sense. Like the moral part of this is important, but everyone focuses on the moral part too much, and they miss the actual strategic part, which is that you need to understand, like if you are an elected official, what it is on the daily basis that working class people are facing that you can deal with in maybe the short term, right? Where we're not able to, for example, move past capitalism, but there are everyday struggles, everyday things that you have the power and the ability to start, tackling. If you lose that connection to the base, you're not going to be able to act on that. On the other side, if you want to do something, if you understand strategically that there's some kind of conflict that has to happen, either with an opposing political party, with the capitalist class, or with the state itself, right? Think about the Supreme Court, for example. If you want to be able to take those things on, you won't be able to take those things on if you don't have the base, the working class behind you. So when he's talking here about understanding this strategic orientation of the left, to being able to build up its own capacity and its own organization and being rooted in the class versus just acting for the class. It's not just a question of morality. It's a very, very critical question of strategy.
Around like chickens without their heads off, with not enough hours a day to deal just with the parliamentary issues. So the problem becomes, where do you get the resources? Where do you get the time to do this other stuff? Right? We were talking about this earlier. And this is, I think, the oldest and most difficult problem. If you don't address it immediately, if you don't address it now, then all of the Michelsian things that I was describing in the iron law of oligarchy, all of the problems both with Communist Party vanguardism and all of the problems with social democratic parliamentarism will begin to sediment themselves at a very early stage. Okay? So I think that's what I would say to that question. But it's very general. It can't speak to the specific situation.
So I just put the link in the chat. Y'all should watch this entire lecture. It's truly phenomenal. Something I go back to all the time. But what he's saying here, I think, is really critical for us to pay attention to right now, where we don't have it, right? We don't have the, any kind of real representation on the government level that we need. We have some figures, right? We have tensions with them. But even if everybody was perfectly in step with the movement, it's very clear the numbers just aren't reflective of what they need to be. So then it becomes even more important, as we're trying to build up a movement that can win, that we actually take these threats of falling into the crisis of the issues of social democracy in the past, or in the issues of the kind of problems of other socialist parliamentary or electoral movements of the past, right? That right now we take that threat really, really seriously, because it's right now that we can do something about it. Because once it crystallizes and ossifies, becomes ossified in the future, it's too late to be able to go back and rebuild those kind of institutions. Right now is the time, and we have to be able to, yes, be able to juggle a lot of things at once. Understand our strategic place, right, of weakness and disorganization, where we need to be, but also be building up a movement that can succeed when it comes to power. Because sometimes it can be hard to even think about the pitfalls of what happens with parliamentarianism, right? Or with social democracy, when we're at a moment right now where we're demobilized and demoralized. But right now is the time that we can actually be building up those movements that are rooted in the working class, that are building up and leaning on local and community leaders to be able to deliver the things in the short term for working people, and then also build the basis for the long-term transition and the end to the exploitation under the system. Folks, I wish I could sit around and chat, but I really do have to go. Please consider supporting the show at patreon.com/left reckoning. We have a lot of really great resources on there, all these bonus episodes, deep dives into theory, Marx, Lenin, Leo Panitch, etc., that are all out there. Hours and hours and hours of content. We have some fun too. Matt had a really fun movie viewing over the weekend. Y'all should definitely check out. I think he's going to do another one this weekend on Saturday. Bonus episode is going to be coming out on Monday this week. Sorry, I came back to a little bit of a firestorm I got to deal with. But please do consider supporting the show, supporting the work we do over here at Left Reckoning. We got a lot more work to do, and also look out in your community right now for how you can get involved in supporting the Teamsters workers as they set up and fighting for this strike. I think that this, more than anything, is probably one of the most beneficial things you can do if you consider yourself somebody who wants to fight for working class politics and the working class movement in this country, is be really engaged and involved in this fight. But folks, we'll be back in the next few days. We'll be back on Tuesday for the main show. Until then, take care. Appreciate you all, and talk to you soon.